The last thing I expected to hear was my daughter calling me a nightmare. But that's exactly what she said. I had just flown back from a 3-day business trip, cutting it short by nearly 24 hours. No special occasion. No warning. Just one of those motherly instincts. You know the kind, the ones that whisper to you late at night. Go home. Something's off. We had just celebrated 3 years of being back under one roof. 3 years of trying again. 3 years of rebuilding what life and choices had broken down between us. It hadn't always been perfect, but I truly believed we were in a good place. Laughing at dinner, folding laundry together, even watching those crime documentaries she loved. We were reconnecting, so I thought. I remember everything about that moment. The taxi dropped me off just after 6 p.m. The lights in the living room were on. There was music playing softly from her favorite playlist, the one with those melancholy piano tracks, and she was in the kitchen, barefoot, on speakerphone. I didn't mean to overhear anything, but when your child's voice drifts through the hallway, unfiltered, unguarded, you stop. You freeze. And then, her words cut through the air like glass shattering in slow motion. Living with my mom is a complete nightmare. She laughed. Not nervously. Not guiltily. A full unbothered laugh. Then she added, almost proudly, I wake up every day regretting coming back. If it wasn't for her money, I'd be gone already. I didn't move. My feet refused to step forward. My hands refused to reach for the doorknob. My voice silent. Because in that second, I wasn't her mother. I was just a stranger. Listening to the unedited truth. There was no sadness in her voice, only certainty. I stood there for what felt like a lifetime. And then quietly I walked back outside. Sat in the car I had just paid for. Asked the driver to take me around the neighborhood a few times. When I finally walked back in, exactly at my normal return time, she greeted me with a smile. And I smiled back. I hugged her. She hugged me. And we went on with our evening. As if I hadn't just heard my entire worth reduced to a financial transaction. But from that moment on, everything in me shifted. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just watched. And 5 days later, she called me 27 times in 1 hour. But by then, everything had already changed. If you're not hitting that subscribe button right now, ask yourself, would you be brave enough to keep listening if this was your daughter? Would you be strong enough to stay silent just long enough to truly see someone for who they are? Some truths hurt, but silence hurts worse. And this story has only just begun. She was born in late spring, when the air still had a bite to it but the flowers had begun to bloom. Emily, my only child, my first everything. She came into the world with quiet eyes, observant, studying, always thinking. Even as a baby, she didn't cry for attention, she waited. She was gentle, reserved, smart in ways that unnerved me sometimes. The kind of child who didn't scream when she was hurt. She simply withdrew. Raising her wasn't always easy, but it was my honor. And I mean that, my honor. Because from the moment I held her in my arms, I made one quiet vow. To give her everything I never had. Stability, peace, love without conditions. And for a while I did. Even after her father left. He didn't say goodbye. Didn't leave a letter. One day he kissed her forehead and told me he was going out for a coffee. He never came back. She was 7. I was 32. And I remember sitting on the kitchen floor the next morning, with unpaid bills in one hand and her lunchbox in the other, wondering if I could actually pull this off. But I did. I built a life brick by brick. Sometimes working 2 jobs. Sometimes hiding in the bathroom, so she wouldn't see me cry. I sold my wedding ring for a month's rent. Skipped dinners to pay for her dance classes. Missed every vacation to pay off debts I didn't even create. And I never once made her feel the cost of it. Emily had sleepovers. She had birthday parties with cakes shaped like castles and balloons that took days to deflate. She had good schools, music lessons, clean clothes, and a mother who showed up every single time. But when she turned 19, something started to change. She fell in love with a boy I didn't trust. You know the type, smiles too wide, hands too familiar, promises too easy. I didn't approve. But she was old enough to make her own choices. And young enough to believe consequences were always temporary. Over the next few years I watched her drift. College became optional. The savings I had set aside? Gone within months. She bounced between part-time jobs and dead-end apartments. From one man to another. From chaos to confusion. Always searching for something. Never staying long enough to find it. I tried to help without smothering. Offered advice without judgment. But she met every attempt with a wall. A look, a silence, a slight tilt of her head that said, "I know what I'm doing." And maybe she did. Or maybe she was just lost. She came back to me when she was 26. It was a Tuesday. She showed up at my door with a duffel bag, 3 overdraft notices, and a voice that cracked when she said, "Mom, I don't know where else to go." I said nothing. I just stepped aside. I helped her unpack. I set up the guest room with new sheets. I ordered takeout because I remembered her favorite noodles. And when she fell asleep on the couch that night, I stood there and watched her breathing. Almost like I did when she was a child. Except this time, I wasn't just her mother. I was her safety net. I paid off her credit cards without asking questions. Put her on my health insurance. Helped her apply for jobs, therapy, and even a new phone plan. I gave her the spare key to my home. And without saying it out loud, the key to my forgiveness. 3 years passed. And slowly, the version of her I had longed for seemed to return. She cooked dinner sometimes. She started volunteering at the animal shelter. She even began calling me Mama again. Something she hadn't done since high school. I let my guard down. Let my heart believe we were healing. That the storm had passed and we had survived. I introduced her to my colleagues. Took her on work trips. Let her shadow my daily operations. She said she wanted to learn the business. Said I inspired her. And I believed her. I even began making plans to step back. To retire early and let her slowly take over. Felt right. Like everything I had worked for was finally circling back. I used to sit by the window some evenings watching her water the garden thinking, we did it. We made it through, but I should have known better. Love doesn't always mean loyalty. And coming home doesn't always mean coming clean. I gave her the life I never had. Or so I thought. It was a Thursday afternoon when I changed my flight. No emergency. No reason really. I just missed home. Missed her. I had spent 3 days in Chicago finalizing a partnership deal, something that had taken me months to negotiate. The kind of meeting that once would have consumed my every thought. But this time my mind kept drifting back to her. Emily. I imagined her sitting by the window, tea in hand. Maybe reading one of those old crime thrillers she loved. Maybe waiting for me. We had planned to have dinner the next day. Our usual Friday night at that little Thai place by the pier. But something told me to come home early. I didn't text. Didn't call. I thought let me surprise her. Let her see what it feels like to be thought of, to be prioritized. Just like I'd always tried to do. The flight landed just after 5 p.m. Everything smooth. I asked the driver to slow down as we approached the neighborhood. Not for any real reason. Just soaking in the familiar trees. The flower boxes I'd insisted she help me plant in spring. The porch light was already on, casting that soft yellow hue across the driveway. Her car was there. She was home. I didn't knock. I used my key. Quietly. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and basil, her favorite candle. The hallway was still. But I could hear faint music coming from the kitchen, and her voice. She was laughing. Playful. I smiled at first. Hearing her happy did something to my heart. Then I realized she wasn't alone. She was on speakerphone. I didn't mean to listen. God knows I would give anything not to have heard what came next. I froze in the hallway just outside the kitchen entrance. She was chopping something on the cutting board, laughing with whoever was on the other end. Then I heard it. She's so controlling. A total nightmare. I can't wait to get my own place. Just using her for now. The words didn't hit all at once. They arrived in fragments. Like glass breaking in stages. Then came silence. Then another laugh. Then her voice again, softer this time, almost smug. She thinks we're bonding. It's actually kind of cute. I didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Just stood there, rooted like a ghost in my own home. My daughter. My Emily. The same girl I had cradled through heartbreak. The same woman I had welcomed back when the world chewed her up and spat her out, calling me a nightmare. Admitting without shame that she was using me. I felt my fingers twitch. I wanted to walk in, to say her name, to ask her to look me in the eye and repeat every word. But I didn't. Instead, I turned around, walked back to the front door, pulled it open as slowly as I had entered, and left. The cab driver looked confused when I slid into the back seat again. I asked him to drive me around for a bit. Nowhere in particular. Just away. The city passed by like a dream I couldn't wake from. Billboards. Brake lights. People walking dogs. The world kept moving, unaware that mine had just shifted. I didn't cry. Not then. Tears require clarity, and in that moment I had none. I sat with my hands folded, replaying her words again and again, like an old voicemail you don't want to delete, but can't stop listening to. Just using her for now. When the clock hit 7:45 p.m., I asked the driver to take me back. I timed it perfectly, just as I would have if I'd taken my original flight. Let her believe nothing had changed. I walked through the door, dropped my keys in the bowl by the console, hung up my coat. She was standing in the hallway, phone in one hand, half a smile on her face. "Mom, you're back," she said, stepping in for a hug. I hugged her back. And in that hug, I buried 100 broken pieces. I felt her heartbeat, felt the warmth of her skin, and for a moment, I wondered if she even knew what she'd done, if it had simply been a passing comment, a joke. But no, there had been no hesitation in her voice, no guilt in her laughter, no affection in her truth. I made dinner that night, set the table, asked about her day, listened to her talk about some new guy she was texting, nodded, smiled, agreed. She had no idea I had been standing in that hallway, no idea that I now saw her differently, clearly, completely. But something in me broke, and I decided from that moment on, I was going to test everything I thought I knew about her. I didn't change overnight. That would have made things easier, cleaner. But no, what followed was slow, deliberate. I woke up the next morning and made her breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, a little bowl of fruit on the side, just how she liked it. She thanked me with a smile that had always made my heart soften. But this time it did nothing. I smiled back, while something inside me stiffened. From that day forward, I became a quiet observer in my own home. I paid closer attention to the way she walked into a room, to what time she left the house, to how quickly she flipped her phone over whenever I passed by. And I began to notice things I had missed before, or maybe refused to see. She was always texting, always scrolling, always somewhere else. I'd ask how her job applications were going. She'd smile, not say, still waiting to hear back. But I knew better. I checked the printer one afternoon while she was out. The resumes I had helped her draft, still sitting there, unprinted, untouched, and slightly curled at the edges like old secrets. She wasn't applying. She wasn't even pretending anymore. She stayed out late more often. Sometimes she'd come back after midnight, slipping into the house like she was the teenager I once grounded for sneaking out. Except now she didn't bother with excuses. One night I asked gently, "Everything okay?" She looked at me like the question annoyed her, mumbled something about needing air, and disappeared upstairs. I began checking the bank account quietly, not to control, just to confirm. And what I found hit harder than I was ready for. Charges I didn't recognize, dinners, online orders, spa treatments, withdrawals at odd hours, the savings account we once shared, the one I opened for her fresh start, draining like a sink with no stopper. I stopped asking questions. Instead, I started logging answers. She kept her phone locked, of course, but people forget things. One evening she left her laptop open on the dining table, her chat window still up. I didn't go looking, but I saw enough. Messages to a friend I didn't recognize. Screenshots of our conversations, captioned with laughing emojis. One message read, "She thinks I'm finally becoming responsible. I'm just biding my time. When I've saved enough, or found a man with better pockets, I'm out." I remember the way my hands trembled, not from rage, not even heartbreak, from realization. She wasn't just using me. She had never come back to reconnect. She had come back to survive. I was a roof, a wallet, a placeholder. And I think what hurt the most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the performance. Every laugh. Every hug. Every, "I love you, Mom." All of it. Rehearsed. Calculated. I walked away from the laptop. Sat in the living room. Turned on the television though I didn't watch a thing. Just stared at the screen. Wondering how many other mothers were out there right now. Feeding people who'd already decided to bite the hand holding the spoon. That night I couldn't sleep. I watched the ceiling fan spin until 3 a.m. And then I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. Not directly. I needed to know how deep it went. How far she was willing to push. What else she was hiding behind that sweet voice and practiced gratitude. So I kept playing the part. The loving, trusting, selfless mother. But beneath it all, I was no longer a mother making space for her daughter's healing. I was a woman keeping record. Every smile she gave me after that point felt like a test. And I passed them all by failing hers. I gave her no sign I knew anything. I wanted her comfortable, predictable, because only then would she reveal the full extent of her deception. I watched her laugh. I watched her lie. And I watched her live under my roof like she had earned the right. And every time I felt the urge to scream, to slam her laptop shut or confront her with the receipts and chat logs, I reminded myself, you don't set fire to a house while you're still inside. You turn off the lights, one by one, until the person living there realizes they've been standing in the dark the whole time. Every moment you waste without subscribing is a moment you're ignoring how quickly love can turn into leverage. Don't think it could happen to you? That's what I thought. And if you're still too afraid to hear the truth, then go ahead and leave a comment below and explain why you're not ready. Why you'd rather cling to comfort than confront the cost of loving someone too much, too blindly for too long. Because this isn't just my story. It could be yours. And by the time you realize it, it may already be too late. Revenge doesn't always arrive in rage. Sometimes it walks in slowly, dressed in silence, with nothing left to prove. I stopped waiting for apologies. I stopped hoping for changes. And I began preparing for peace. The first step was quiet. I walked into my bank on a Tuesday morning. Asked to separate my finances. Removed her from the joint account. No announcement, no explanation. Just a signature, and a soft thank you to the teller. She wouldn't notice at first. Not while the bills were still being paid. Not while the lights stayed on. That was fine. Let her feel secure. The second move hurt more than I expected. There was a vacation I had planned. Just for the two of us. A healing trip, I once thought. Somewhere warm. Somewhere with clear waters and quiet sunsets. I imagined us laughing, maybe even letting go of the past. But those fantasies were mine alone. So I canceled the trip. Didn't tell her. Just erased it from the calendar and moved the money into a private account. Not for punishment. For protection. My own. I updated my will. Removed her name as emergency contact. Shifted everything into the hands of someone I could trust. Someone who hadn't proven love was a currency they'd spend so carelessly. That afternoon in the lawyer's office felt like I was shedding an old skin. I walked out lighter. Not free, but no longer fooled. Back home, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter. Just one page. Folded it twice. Sealed it in an envelope. On the front I wrote, "For Emily, when you're ready to be honest." I didn't know when that day would come, or if it ever would. But I wanted her to know, someday, that I had seen everything, heard everything, and still didn't destroy her with it. That I chose silence over spectacle. Because that's the thing about true revenge. It's not about what you take away. It's about what they lose without even realizing it, until it's gone. I began pulling back emotionally, one invisible string at a time. Stopped asking where she was going. Stopped making breakfast. Stopped texting, "Let me know when you're home safe." She noticed. Of course she did. But she didn't know what to do with the shift. She called it distance, blamed me for being cold. But I wasn't cold. I was calm. And calm in the right hands can be far more devastating than anger ever could. I started going out more. Meeting old friends. Reconnecting with parts of myself I had buried under the weight of motherhood. I laughed louder. Dressed brighter. Did things she never bothered to notice I loved. And all the while I watched her begin to unravel. Not publicly. Not dramatically. But slowly, she started asking questions. Did you cancel the trip? I thought we were doing dinner Friday. I saw the savings account is gone. What happened? And I'd respond with softness. Oh, I must have forgotten to tell you. Plans changed. Or sometimes nothing at all. That's what silence does. It makes the other person sit alone with their own guilt, with their own decisions. And you? You just keep living. I caught her in my room one day, rummaging through papers, looking for something, answers maybe. I didn't interrupt. I just stood quietly in the hallway until she noticed me. She flinched. And for the first time in months, her eyes looked afraid. Not of punishment, of realization. That I knew. That I had known. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand gently. It's okay, Emily. You don't have to explain anything. I understand now. She stared at me like she wanted to ask 100 questions, but none of them came out. She left my room, and for the first time, she closed the door softly behind her. That night, I placed the sealed envelope in her drawer. Didn't say a word about it. I wasn't waiting for confrontation. I was waiting for clarity. For her to see who she had been, not to me, but to herself. And for her to decide if that's who she wanted to keep being. Some people confuse silence for surrender. They think quiet is weakness. But silence is where strength sharpens its blade. And I was no longer the mother desperate to be loved. I was a woman who had remembered her worth. What would you have done if you were me? Speak from the heart. I'm listening. 5 days. That's how long it took. 5 days after that phone call, the one I was never meant to hear, she finally walked into the storm she created. It was a Thursday, early evening. I had just made myself a cup of tea when I heard the front door open. She walked in with the same casual bounce she always had, shopping bags in hand, phone to her ear, laughing at something I didn't care to understand. But then, it happened. She pulled out her card to pay for something on her phone. Declined. She tried again. Declined. And again. Again. Her laugh faded. The bag slipped from her hand. She walked into the kitchen with confusion in her eyes. Mom, did something happen to our account? Our account. I looked up from my tea with the softest smile I could muster. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said calmly. You're very resourceful, aren't you? She blinked. And for the first time, I watched my words actually hit her. Not bounce off with entitlement, but sink in. Deep. She didn't speak again that night. Just hovered near the hallway for a moment, then disappeared into her room. But I knew that silence. I had lived in it. It was the sound of someone realizing the game had changed. The next morning, my phone began buzzing before sunrise. Once, then twice, then relentlessly. 27 missed calls in under an hour. All from her. All ignored. Because I had nothing left to say. And everything she needed to hear was buried in what I refused to repeat. She sent messages. Mom, I think there's been a mistake. Why is the card not working? I'm locked out of the joint savings. Did you change the passwords? Can we just talk? Then the apologies started to trickle in. The kind that come when the comfort runs dry. I didn't mean what I said. You're taking everything the wrong way. I was just venting. You're my mom. Don't do this to me. And then, gaslighting. You always overreact. You don't understand how stressed I am. You've been distant too, you know. I let it sit. Didn't respond. Until 10:47 a.m. When I sent one message. Just one. Now you know how it feels to be left out of the truth. She didn't reply for 2 hours. Please don't do this. I love you, but love without respect isn't love. It's manipulation wearing perfume. I watched her begin to spiral. The mask slipping. The panic rising. She tried to cook dinner that night, her way of making peace. I thanked her for it. Sat at the table. Ate slowly. And when she tried to bring up what happened, I held up a hand gently. No need. We're just two adults now living under one roof. Her face crumbled just a little. And I stayed calm. Because this was no longer about revenge. It was about balance. And sometimes the only way to teach someone the weight of their choices is to let them carry it. She began doing the chores suddenly. Laundry folded, dishes washed. I didn't praise her. Didn't pretend things were okay. They weren't. They were just honest. That was the difference. Before, everything was built on illusion. Now, it was built on silence and truth. She started sleeping in late. Not out of laziness. Out of dread. I watched her wander the house like a guest, looking for an opening. For the mother who would rescue her one more time. But that mother was gone. And in her place was a woman who had finally learned how to rescue herself. She opened the sealed envelope 3 days later. I knew she did, because I heard the crumple of paper and the muffled sobs through the wall. I didn't go to her. Didn't ask what she thought. Didn't offer comfort. Some truths require solitude to understand. In that envelope I had written, Emily, I loved you more than I've ever loved anything. I gave you all that I had: time, trust, my own dreams. But love isn't a license to use someone. One day you'll have a child. And if they ever look at you with the same betrayal I saw in the mirror, I pray you remember this moment. Not to punish you, but to protect them. She didn't mention the letter. And I didn't ask. But from that day forward, her voice softened. Her presence felt heavier. Like she was finally beginning to sit with herself. Sometimes, pain doesn't teach the lesson. Silence does. And this was just the beginning of hers. I didn't raise a cruel daughter. At least, I don't believe I did. But in the quiet hours, when the noise had settled and all the performances ended, I was finally able to face a harder truth. Maybe I raised a comfortable one. Comfortable enough to believe my sacrifices were endless. Comfortable enough to use love as a safety net. Not a connection. Not a bond. Just a fallback. Because I had always caught her. Every fall. Every lie. Every lazy excuse. She knew I would always be there with a soft answer and a warm plate. And over time, that softness became a weakness in her eyes. But here's the thing. Love without boundaries doesn't feel like love. It feels like surrender. And I had surrendered myself for so long. She didn't even notice it was costing me pieces of who I was. The hardest part of being a mother? It's not the birth. It's not the sleepless nights. It's not even the heartbreak. It's the moment you realize that protecting your child too much can make them incapable of protecting themselves. I spent years absorbing her storms. But this time I stepped out of the rain. I saw her one last time. It wasn't planned. She showed up at the house unannounced. No performance. She just stood there. On the porch. Crying. Tears running down the same cheeks I used to kiss goodnight. But I didn't feel the old ache. Not anymore. I walked out slowly. Met her in silence. She opened her arms. And I gave her a hug. But it was different this time. There was no warmth in it. It was the kind of hug that says, I loved you. I still do. But I won't lose myself for you anymore. She cried harder when I didn't say much. Because silence speaks louder when you've spent years screaming love into someone who only heard convenience. And as she stood there trying to hold on to the last thread, I stepped back. Not out of hate. Not even out of anger. But because closure doesn't require a slammed door. It simply requires you to stop leaving it wide open. That day I became a different kind of mother. Not the one who fixes, but the one who feels and lets go. It hurt more than I can say. More than I'll ever admit in full. But sometimes, the strongest love isn't the love that stays. It's the love that steps back and stays gone. I still remember the 27 missed calls, the desperation in each ring, the panic in every silence. But I also remember something else. My own voice. The one I had ignored for years. The one that whispered, enough. In the end, I didn't answer her calls. Because I had already answered the only one that mattered. My own. The one that said, you deserve peace too. The one that reminded me, being a mother shouldn't mean disappearing into someone else's needs. I walked back into my home that day, closed the door, made myself tea, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anything. Or anyone. I was just here. Whole. If you're still on the fence, ask yourself this. Can you live with the regret of not being part of stories that peel back the mask on family, pain, and healing? Because these stories, they're not just entertainment. They're mirrors. They're warnings. They're a lifeline for someone who might be where I was, lost inside love that doesn't love back. Subscribe now. Be part of something that sees you. Or, leave a comment. and tell us why you'd rather stay in the dark. But just know, darkness doesn't protect you. It just delays the truth.